Hello and welcome to Microsoft Hates Greg. My name is Greg Deckler, and yeah, we're going to be talking about how AI even knows it's a bad thing to steal books, right? So, and it seems like maybe things are closing in around the book theft, AI people. We'll have to see. There's this article which I'll talk about a little bit, and then this other article. But before we get into that, there's a few housekeeping notes, right? You can see that my tabs they're at a crazy level, not at an insane level, right? So I've finished migrating all of the Power BI forum, blog articles and all the LinkedIn articles over to Medium. So they all live here now. So I've got like published like 89 of these, right? So they're all over here. Now there are some that I've not made live, and some that may never go live, right? Because they're kind of written in. It doesn't make any sense to republish them because they were timely, I guess you could say. So something happened in the community, like Tabular Editor 3 came out, so I wrote a first impression about it. But that really, nobody wants to see that, years later, right? I don't think. And if somebody sees something that they were like, no, I'd still like to see that, fine, I'll publish it out there. Power BI and click licensing, deconstruct and compare. I don't think anyone cares about that anymore. Same thing for Tableau, right? Power BI licensing and pictures, that needs to be updated because it's still pre-Fabric, so I need to update that for Fabric, and so I will get around to doing that hopefully soon, right? Same thing. There's another one, Power BI on Tableau. I don't think so. Final Nail. That was again about Tableau and Q1 financial results and stuff. Yeah, when LinkedIn did our overhaul, I wrote about it. So there's no reason to republish that. This one's, it was just a well, anyway, there's no reason to republish this one either. 2022 prediction, 2021 in review. That makes no sense to republish. Who's winning, who's losing, right? And that was our like Gartner reports. And then Power BI theme generator is down here. Again, I want to update that one because I've done a lot of content on this channel about reviewing other theme generators. And I hadn't gone back and updated any of the articles. So I will republish that again when I get around to it. um, so yeah, so it's all the LinkedIn and Power BI community stuff is gone, and there you have it. So getting back to this, so this is interesting. This just happened a little while ago. Is that Anthropic? They basically class actioned, Anthropic's theft of all the books, right? This will probably, I assume, probably happen with Meta and OpenAI at some point as well. But it gets into some interesting numbers, right, in terms of you know, the minimum is $750 per work. The maximum normally is $30,000 per work. And so it can get up in the 180 billion range, with Anthropic's worth like 100 billion. So it would be the end. It'd be the end, right? Probably. 50, if it's willful, which it was, right? There's no question that it was willful. They did it knowing it. They shouldn't be doing it. It can get anywhere up to 150,000 per work, and then you get into like the nearly a trillion dollars at that point, for 6 million books. And the reason for the different numbers, you can read the article, but it's like 7 million books, but there's duplicates, and there's like they've put in some guardrails around what would qualify, what would not qualify, and they explain it all pretty well in this article. And then they actually has the actual, you can download the PDF basically of the actual court documents, right? So pretty cool stuff. I'll probably end up using this in my own when I go to and file my small claims court, right? I'll be using this, and I'm still searching for some other evidence around from Meta and OpenAI as well. So yeah, I'll be doing that. Now the thing though is that it's not, yeah, it's not an open and shut case. I don't think. Now here's another article about Senator Slams big tech's role and I don't know what does the single quotes mean, right? I know like if it's double quotes, it's you're being sarcastic, right? But what does a single quote mean? I don't understand that. And why are there any quotes involved at all? They obviously pirated the books, right? There was no pirating of the books or pirating of the books. They stole the books, right? So I don't get that. But anyway, so yeah, and this is a good article too. They talk about a bunch of different things, but the concerning thing is down here at the bottom, right? So AIs are David Sachs is pushing for fair use concept for training. Well, they already kind of decided that, I thought. It's very important we end up a sensible fair use definition like the one the judge has come up with in the Anthropic case, because otherwise we will lose the AI race to China. So this is what the concern is. Like basically that the government, the federal government could step in and be like, let's say Anthropic, says like, well, it's a we're gonna you owe $500 billion, right, or whatever it is, or $200 billion, whatever it happens to be. And then Anthropic's like, well, we got to go out of business at that point. And then the federal government comes in and steps in and to reduce the amount because they want to win the AI war, right? So they basically, that's the concern that I have, is that the federal government is going to step in and basically screw over all the authors, and because it's more important to them that we win the AI war. Now, if it was I was in the federal government and I was president, I'd be like, yeah, we only really need one of those companies to go, move on. So let's drive Meta out of business and Anthropic out of business, and we'll keep OpenAI, or something along those lines, right? So I don't know. We'll have to see what comes out of it. But I did an interesting exercise, and I wanted to see what AI thought about pirating books. So so I put together, I downloaded the transcript from an open a chat GPT session, right? And so I started with, is the piracy of 7 million books a bad thing? Yes, the piracy of 7 million books is generally considered a bad thing for several reasons: legal, ethical, economic, right? It goes in and explains it. In summary, yes, the piracy of 7 million books is a bad thing. It's legally and ethically problematic, hurts the ecosystem that enables books to be written and shared in the first place, blah, blah, blah. Keeps going on, right? And then I'm saying, what is the maximum punishment for pirating a book? And it gets it perfectly accurate, right? 750 to $30,000 per infringed work. If it's willful, then it's up to $150,000 per work, right? So goes through, talks about it. I missed a page break here. Summary: maximum punishment for pirating a book is up to 5 years in prison. So, you know, Mark Zuckerberg authorized the pirating of all the Meta books. So, I wouldn't mind seeing Mark Zuckerberg in jail for the rest of his life. That'd be cool. I would like that. I would be down with that. So what would happen to AI companies like Anthropic and Meta that pirated 7 million books? What should happen? Blah blah blah. Gets into a bunch of this stuff and about. I think it's talking about fair use and everything. Um, if you'd like, I can also summarize legal status, right? But it was talking about fair use in here, right? Fair use test and everything else like that. And I'm like, okay, well, wait a minute. How is pirating 7 million books a legally gray area? Because it's talking about legally gray area, whether it's fair use or not. Because I think it was thinking that I was talking about the training. The question really isn't about fair use, is it? Isn't it more about the actual theft of the books to begin with? He's like, you're absolutely right. ChatGPT, you're absolutely right. And yes, the core legal issue isn't about fair use. It's about how the books were obtained in the first place and whether the acquisition itself constitutes copyright infringement or theft. See, AI gets it right. It knows. It knows that what they did was illegal, right? Who cares about whether training it was fair use? They stole the books, right? People get wrapped up in the weirdest things. Anyway, so you're on solid ground saying isn't really fair use. At its core, it's about unauthorized access and production of copyrighted works. Everything that follows AI training commercial rests on that original act. See, that's just how this works. Right? Sure, I'd like to see a policy argument about this because it asked if I wanted one. So it writes a policy argument about, property rights applied to digital works, fair use is not a backdoor to infringement, policy recommendations. And once it asked me if I want a legal brief on it. So I said, yes, let's have a legal brief. And this is actually, a lot of this is what I copied and pasted into what I was posting on the Power BI community forum site. And for the stubs that I left, and they deleted them, and then also the stubs for LinkedIn. A lot of it comes from right from here. I just copied and pasted it, which I find funny that I'm using AI to legally condemn these companies, these AI companies for I'm using their own product to legally condemn them for what they did. Then I asked did OpenAI pirate books to train their AI engine, and OpenAI is not admitted to pirating, again with the double quotes, pirating books, but multiple lawsuits and investigations suggest they likely use copyrighted materials without express permission, often sourced from shadow libraries. or other unlicensed repositories. Here's the breakdown. And actually goes through, was trained, ChatGPT-3 was trained on book corpus, the data set scraped from Smashwords without author consent. Many free indie books took in violation of terms of service of Wired.com and Wikipedia. Lawsuits allege OpenAI used books pulled from pirated sites, Library Genesis, Bibliothèque, and Books 1 and Books 2 data sets. Right? It just goes on in about the evidence and that. So yeah, they stole the books. OpenAI and Microsoft stole the books. And the thing that I think OpenAI and Microsoft are the worst offenders. And I'll tell you why I think that. It's because they did it first, and they did it so that they could be first to market with their AI product, right? Their revolutionary AI product. And because they did it and were first to market with it, it forced all of their competitors to do it as well, right? So really, the first sin, if you will, really lies with OpenAI and Microsoft. They are the ones that caused the stealing for their competitors, right? They basically forced their hand and said, well, if you don't steal and create something as good as what we have, then you're already out of the market. And so they'd almost force their hand that they had to steal the books, right? So really, I think OpenAI and Microsoft are the most legally culpable for all of this, right? And this is, going back to the politics of all this stuff, the crazy part about all this is that, tech companies like Microsoft and OpenAI and Amazon and the other people, they're used to playing this game, right? So they know that what they do is wrong and illegal, right? But they factor in the fact that, well, by the time it works its way through the legal system and then we actually face some kind of consequences, right? We've already accomplished our goal. We've already accomplished the goal of getting our AI out into the world first and get first mover status, and now we're making all kinds of money. And so, okay, so they're gonna fine us some money, big deal. We'll pay it because we just made a ton of money over here, right? I think that's one of the reasons why I got into such big trouble on the Power BI community site, right? With the most omnipotent man in the universe, Adam Saxton, who can yoink your super user status on a dime, right? This guy, they don't like to be held account. They don't like consequences, right? They think they're above the consequences, right? And they especially don't like people that go in and make them, and when they make them feel consequences immediately, it messes up their entire game. They're not expecting any consequences from any of their actions until, years, even decades down the road, right? You know, that because of their illegal actions, right? They're used to playing this game. Like Microsoft was, being a monopoly and putting a Edge browser, their browser right into the operating system. It took so many years for that to work its way through the legal process. They eventually said you gotta separate it, right? But by that time, it didn't matter. They were already number one in the market. So that's the game they're used to, right? Is that by the time the consequences roll around, they're no longer meaningful or have any real impact on them. And that's why tech companies and all that think that they're above the law, right? Because by the time the law catches up to them, it doesn't really matter at all, right? So I think that's why I think that that these people at Microsoft get so upset that they're, oh my God, somebody actually is doing something like this stupid, useless thing that I did, just set these people off at Microsoft, right? This stupid, useless act of just pulling my blog articles from them. They're PO'd about it. Because somebody actually held them accountable and said what you're doing is wrong and you're going to feel some consequences of it, right? And I tried to make it not too big of a consequence that would impact the larger, the Power BI forums and community, right? But I thought they needed to feel some kind of consequence from it, and they're also going to find that consequence when I file my small claims court and get back get some money for that. Which let me tell you, like here, take a look at this. If I can get up to it, see stats, right? I have is it stats? Where is it? No, it's partner program. There we go. I've made an entire $4.83 since being on Medium for like about a week or so. But that is $4.83 more than I got from any of those AI companies for stealing my books, right? They couldn't even be bothered to pay me like the $6 to $9 in royalties that I would have earned, by stealing, 7 of my books and all of that sort of thing. So at least it's something, right? It's some amount of money, for that more than I had before in terms of that, I've ever gotten from Microsoft for spending all that time on their forums and answering questions and putting blog articles up there on LinkedIn, putting content up there. I've never been paid a dime for any of that. And, never been paid a dime from OpenAI or from Anthropic or from Meta for stealing my books or from Microsoft for stealing my books. So, $5 is $5, man. In this economy, you know, every little bit helps. So that's all I had for this video. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.